Hi everyone, welcome to WION Live broadcast with me, Susan Tehrani from New York City. We have a packed show for you today. We'll talk about President Biden's dilemma over the response to the attack in Jordan on American service members. We'll also find out whether or not Hamas will agree to the Paris peace plan. But first, a look at this hour's headlines. In Pakistan, Imran Khan's party says the verdict is hasty after the former prime minister and his wife sentenced to 14 years in jail for illegally selling state gifts. Artillery fire pounds southern Gaza as mediators seek a halt to Israel's nearly 4-month war with Hamas, and UN agencies warn withdrawing aid funding risks a humanitarian collapse. Russia and Ukraine exchanged hundreds of prisoners of war in its latest swap that comes just a week after Kyiv allegedly shot down a plane that is carrying dozens of captured Ukrainian soldiers. Moscow says 195 of its soldiers were freed. At least 18 protesters arrested in France as convoys of tractors near capital Paris. Those arrested were trying to block traffic near a wholesale food market. And finally, the Philadelphia 76ers suffer a major blow as reigning league MVP Joel Embiid limps off the floor in a defeat to the Golden State Warriors. The NBA's leading scorer this season will now undergo an MRI scan on his knees.
Yeah, right there. Wow. The reaction from Embiid, and Kuminga knew that there was...
U.S. President Joe Biden says that the U.S. will strike back, this after a deadly drone attack killed 3 U.S. service members and wounded over 40 at a small base in Jordan over the weekend. What isn't yet clear is who will be hit where and how hard. Facing growing pressure in an election year, Biden is holding Iran responsible for supplying the weapons to the people who carried out the deadly attack on the military base.
Yes. I do hold them responsible in the sense that they're supplying the weapons to the people who did it.
Pentagon has a wide array of options, but the U.S. must walk a fine line. A weak response will do little to deter further attacks by Iran-backed militia groups, while a major assault risks expanding the turmoil in the Middle East and drawing America into a wider conflict. Striking inside Iran, including on the Revolutionary Guard's Quds force, will send a strong direct message to Tehran. But Iran is no Syria or Afghanistan. It has a powerful military and can pack a powerful punch. Many experts argue that such a move is needed because U.S. strikes on Iran-backed militias in recent months have not deterred them. But it also would be the riskiest move due to worries that it would inflame militias and endanger Tehran. Tehran is watching cautiously. Iran's envoy to the United Nations has warned that the country will respond decisively to any potential attack. The risks notwithstanding, the 3 U.S. service members are the first to be killed in militia strikes since that Hamas attack against Israel and the war in Gaza started. Their deaths have triggered demands for a strong American response. All right. For more on this, we are being joined by Mark Marowitz. He's a professor at State University of New York Maritime College and also a political analyst and lawyer. Mark, welcome to WION. Welcome back. If President Biden says he doesn't want to expand the war, but also says that he has decided on a response, what should one presume Biden is going to do?
Well, he has a lot of options. One would be to, as you say, strike the IRGC or Quds force, not necessarily in Iran, but in Syria and where else in the world that Iran is doing its mischief, malevolence, and violence. But I think that the problem here is Biden's indecisiveness. Actually, if you look at the statistics, there have been 159 attacks by proxies against the United States elements throughout the Middle East since October 17th. And the United States has supplied millions and billions of dollars to Iran, including in connection with a ridiculous nuclear deal that was actually President Trump terminated, which President Biden put back in place. And I should say about options, it's important to keep in mind that in 2019, when the Iranian proxies killed an American contractor, Trump ordered the killing of Soleimani, a very high-level military officer in Iran, which proves that the United States can be decisive when it needs to be. The problem, I think, here is the statements from the Pentagon, the statements of Biden is, we don't want a wider war. We're afraid of a wider war. So what is the point? If you're sitting in Iran and you're listening to this, it's once again, this is the United States of America with the large Navy with aircraft carriers. And who is challenging us? The Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas. And please remember, and it's very hard to forget, that in 1983, Hezbollah attacked the Marine barracks in Beirut and killed 241 Marines. So throughout this period, since the Iranian Revolution, the Iranians have been doing all these things, and now Biden just, I'm going to do something about it, but I don't want a wider war. Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis, they're upending the world. So the United States needs to step in and do something about it. So that's kind of where we are in we call it it's a Middle East muddle. That's what I would say. Now, the problem is America's need for resolve in the Middle East. We have many, many options. But the problem is that what Iran has been able to do, it is actually said, even on this one, we didn't do this. Or Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th. We didn't do that. Hamas did it. Hezbollah is attacking. We didn't do it. Hezbollah did it. The Houthis are destroying shipping and destroying and trying to shoot missiles. Iran says, we didn't do it. The Houthis did it. Now, that is it's ridiculous. This is the United States of America. This is the greatest military in the world. And Biden's reaction is, we don't want a wider war. So I think we send a very strong message to Iran that we're not going to do anything. And if we do something, it's going to be very, quote, measured and be very careful. And I don't think that's the right approach that the United States should be using on this. We need to be forthright, resolved, and we need to put a stop to this, in addition to help our allies.
It's very interesting. I mean, for lack of a better word, that President Biden constantly picks the least confrontational approach to issues like this. And when he came in office, everyone was very happy that, quote unquote, the adults were back in the room. And here we are, after Russia, and then you have these attacks, and then you have, others that are attacking Americans across the region as well, in the Red Sea and elsewhere. And there doesn't seem to be a consensus on what exactly is the best path forward. There's always this sort of wandering around of what to do. My next question to you, Mark, is how much is the possibility of the specter of a direct Iran-U.S. military conflict? I mean, Iran would probably be crazy if they wanted something like this.
Well, always keep in mind that the oil economy of the world and the economy of the world is right there in the Straits of Hormuz. And I remember at one point where Iran said, you know, we're going to sink ships in the Strait of Hormuz and we'll just destroy the whole oil economy. So they've got a big hold on that. I think the other thing we should keep in mind is the fact that politics is local, which means that Biden is running for president. And, you know, while it is true that American presidents tend to be very popular during times of war, I don't think he's very worried about his chances. And this is actually the way that he's negotiating with Israel and Hamas. Hamas attacked on October 7th. Hezbollah and Houthis are attacking on a regular basis. And he's afraid he's going to have a wider war, because if he does, then he's going to be in the middle of a war. He's going to be blamed by it, particularly by the progressives in the Congress, the Democrats, and Democratic voters are not going to vote for him because he put us into a war. Now, that's a very, very poor excuse for diplomacy and leadership. We look to the president for leadership. We just lost 3 wonderful troops, great, wonderful Americans. I'm looking at them. I'm sad. I'm in tears for their families. He's the president, and he has to go, and he has to go to welcome the coffins of those soldiers. He's the president. Now, how is he going to do that? When he sees that, he's going to be able to just, I'm afraid, I don't know what I'm going to do. He needs to act. Because if he doesn't act, then the United States becomes, I don't know, that was the term, I don't know about China, called us a paper tiger. We're just a paper tiger. The Iranians have expanded into the entire Middle East. I've always asked this question. I never understood the answer. Why are there Iranian Revolutionary Guards in Syria? What are they doing there? Why are they in there? They don't belong there, and they don't belong in Latin America, and they don't belong around the world, but they seem to have expanded their influence. And then the United States provides monetary incentives, and we help them. It's a crazy situation.
It is. It really is. Mark, it's always great to talk to you. Thank you so much for all of your analysis. And I look forward to speaking to you again very soon. We'll be watching in the next hours and days ahead to see what actions President Biden decides to take.
Thank you very much, Susan.
Israel is pumping seawater into Hamas tunnels, a move that the U.S. has warned could endanger the hostages, as the Israeli forces try to dismantle the militant group's underground network in Gaza. After more than a month of declining to comment on reports that the Israeli Defense Forces were flooding Hamas tunnels using water from the Mediterranean Sea, Israeli officials have now acknowledged that they are using the tactic. In a statement, the Israeli military says that the IDF has implemented new capabilities during the war with the aim of neutralizing underground terrorist infrastructure, including by challenging large volumes of water into them. Further adding that this is a significant tool in combating the threat of Hamas's underground infrastructure. Although the IDF has clarified that all tunnels are not being flooded, since the process of attaching pipes and pumps to the shafts are not suited for all the tunnels and could severely damage some areas. On the other hand, in a bid to achieve truce between Israel and Hamas militants, Hamas militant group political leader Ismail Haniyeh has confirmed that it's studying a new proposal to pause the fighting in the Gaza Strip. Haniyeh said the group had been invited to discuss the framework set out by Israel, US, Qatar, as well as Egypt. The proposal comes as one of the most serious peace initiatives in the months-long Israel-Hamas war. Reports say the new proposal aims at a 6-week truce where more Israeli hostages would be exchanged for Palestinian prisoners. The Hamas leader stressed that the group's priorities were a permanent ceasefire and full Israeli withdrawal. But Israel's prime minister ruled that out. Benjamin Netanyahu insists that the war will not end until the elimination of Hamas and the release of all Israeli hostages. Israel says 136 hostages are still being held, and about 24 of them are presumed dead. On Sunday, Qatar's prime minister, along with top intelligence officials from US and Egypt, held talks in Paris. The head of Israeli intelligence and security agencies also attended that meeting. Reports say they agreed on the terms of a framework for a second pause in the fighting. Such a pause may see Hamas releasing any remaining elderly, women, and child hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. during an initial period of 6 weeks, that is. Now, if that's successful, there could be another 2 phases of swaps, with male Israeli soldiers being eventually released. The Israeli Prime Minister's office called the talks constructive, but noted that there were significant gaps which the parties will continue to discuss. UK's Foreign Secretary David Cameron, who is on a fresh tour of the Middle East to quell the war, says that the country is considering a push to recognize a Palestinian state at the United Nations. The move can bring about irreversible progress to a 2-state solution, he says. The diplomatic advance has come hours after Israeli commandos disguised as medical workers and Muslim women stormed into the hospital in the West Bank. As an undercover raid took place, the Israeli forces killed 3 Palestinian militants, including a paralyzed fighter who was shot dead on the bed where he was being treated. Saudi Arabia has restarted talks on a defense pact with the United States, and according to Bloomberg, these talks have been paused after the Israel-Gaza war. In early January, U.S. senators reportedly traveled to the northwestern town of Alula, where they met Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. On the agenda was the revival of earlier negotiations of a defense pact that would have also included historic tie-up between Saudi Arabia and Israel. The immediate priority for the Saudi Crown Prince now would be to convince U.S. President Joe Biden to ease or lift the freeze on the sale of offensive weapons to the kingdom. Washington has imposed the pause back in 2021 amid the war being fought between the Saudis and coalitions of Houthis. In the months to come, the U.S. reportedly told the Saudi rulers that its weapons freeze will be lifted only when Saudi Arabia ends its role in Yemen's war. Experts say that with the region now tense, the kingdom is seeking to replenish its weapons stockpile, for which it is looking at the biggest defense supplier, that being the United States. Now, the freeze came up in the Israeli-Saudi normalization discussion before the Hamas attack on Israel last year. It was almost done, except for a few stumbling blocks. Saudi Arabia has for long said that any deal with the Jewish nation will be conditional on recognition and creation of an independent Palestinian state, something Prime Minister Netanyahu and his right-wing coalition are strictly opposed to. The resolve of both parties strengthened since the Hamas war broke out. Saudi is now sending signals to all parties that it wants a separate Palestinian state, a ceasefire in Gaza, and American involvement in post-war scenarios. American intelligence chief Bill Burns has some comments to make, which are important. Let's take a look at what those are. He's warning that the U.S. will be making a mistake of historic proportion if it cuts off aid to Ukraine. Writing an opinion piece in Foreign Affairs magazine, Burns says that while the U.S. does face a test of power in its support to Ukraine, Russia's victory over Ukraine will embolden China. Central Intelligence Agency's chief says that no one is watching the U.S. support for Ukraine more closely than Chinese leaders. The warning comes as Republicans are holding up aid to Ukraine in Congress in a bid to pressure Biden to fix the broken southern border. In the last 2 years, Washington has contributed a significant amount of aid and armory to Kyiv. And in the article, Burns writes that almost 2 years of war has severely impacted Russia. President Putin is now isolated globally while the conflict is heavily damaging its military and economy. Burns claimed that at least 315,000 Russian soldiers have been killed or wounded in the war, and almost 2/3 of its inventory have been destroyed. He hailed it as a win for Ukrainian soldiers' valor, skill, as well as Western support. In the article, Burns also accused China of providing Russia with critical components to help wear down Ukraine's supporters. He also highlighted Russia's economic relationship with China, claiming that Moscow is sealing its fate as Beijing's economic vessel. Burns said that the Russia-China bilateral trade has risen by nearly 27% in a year. The CIA chief made a big claim that the most foolproof way of giving a sign of American strength to the Chinese is by continuing to support Ukraine. He said continued material backing for Ukraine doesn't come at the expense of Taiwan. It sends an important message of U.S. resolve that helps Taiwan. Excuse me. Yes. A U.S. court has ruled that Elon Musk's $56 billion pay package at Tesla is an unfathomable sum that was unfair to shareholders. This is a big blow to the billionaire CEO's quest to get greater control over the $600 billion company. Delaware Judge Kathleen McCormick's ruling is all set to scuttle the largest pay package in corporate America. The judge opined that the pay package was negotiated by directors who appear to be beholden to the billionaire. Here's what her 201-page ruling read. Was the compensation plan even necessary for Tesla to retain Musk and achieve its goals? The incredible size of the budget compensation, the biggest compensation plan ever, is an unfathomable sum. McCormick directed the Tesla shareholder who challenged the pay package to work with Musk's legal team to implement the ruling. The ruling can, however, be appealed to the Delaware Supreme Court. Meanwhile, the ruling led to Tesla shares falling about 3% in extended trade on Tuesday. The ruling will have a major impact on Musk's personal fortune. His annual pay package forms a significant part of the fortune, which, according to Forbes, stands at $210.6 billion. The ruling will put the spotlight on the next round of compensation negotiations, as well as on Musk's plan to get at least 25% of the voting control to continue as Tesla's boss. Thank you so much for staying with us and watching WION Live broadcast from New York City. I'm Susan Tehrani signing off for now, but don't go away. A lot more news and headlines coming up after this short break.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one.
Inflation, geopolitical tensions, growth, and India's transformational journey from resurgence to resilience. We know the numbers and information can be daunting, but we break down everything and cut out the noise to give you everything you need to know to stay ahead on the big day. As election fever grips Pakistan, WION gets you all the twists and turns. The row over election and selection, players who matter and what's at stake.